Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll give it a couple of seconds to have other attendees as they join, and we'll get started in just a couple of moments. All right, we'll get underway now. We've got a few more people in attendance. My name is Lucas Taylor. I am Head of Client Relations at Onboarding at Strata, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of you here today to this How to Grow Your Business Without Growing Your Headcount webinar that we're holding today. So this is a first for Strata to have these webinars in place, and we will be running more of these into the future. A little bit about my background. I've been in the OC industry for 14 years with extensive experience across operations and business development. I'm actually was an end user of Strata as well before it was done, and I have a practical understanding of the property sector and how it works. With us today, we have Bimal Fernando, who is the CEO and CTO of Strata. Bimal is a software engineer and a strata management professional with 15 plus years experience in the industry. Bimal has created a conscientious, positive, productive team at Strata, driven to shape and serve the strata industry. We would also like to welcome Paul Campbell from Campbell's Corporate Services. Paul is a qualified engineer who stepped into Owners Corporation Management back in 2007. Since then, he's grown Campbell's from 170 properties to nearly 500 properties through word of mouth referrals. These days, he concentrates on smart systems, staff development, industry advocacy, always guided by a simple belief that people matter. And also with us today, we have Tim Sara. Tim brings over 16 years of strata management experience in Sydney, including roles as Associate Director, Head of Client Management, Group Licensee in charge for one of Australia's largest strata firms, and now the co-founder of Sara Strata. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Lucas.
We'd also just like to welcome, do our acknowledgement of country. So this conference is taking place on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri and the Gadigal people, and I want to begin by offering my sincere respect to them as the original owners of the land we hold this conference on. I also extend the respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. So with that, it's going to be a very general discussion as we go through things today. There are a number of points that we'll talk about as we go through this. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section and we will get some answers to you, whether we do it during or at the end, but we'll certainly like to have those questions there. So Tim and Paul, I'd open up with you two and ask the question there, what's the single biggest operational net strata managers hit as their portfolio grows beyond or past a few thousand lots, in your eyes?
I can start if you like, Lucas.
Yep.
Tim?
Thanks, Paul.
I think for me, and over the years, that one of the biggest operational bottlenecks has been email management. I think for pretty much every OC manager, it's emails are a constant burden, a constant strain, and the option of managing emails better is an area I think that shows a lot of promise in terms of returning managers some time in which they can then focus on other areas such as client relationships.
100%, Paul, yeah.
Yeah,
Tim?
I would say up front, I don't manage a few thousand lots at the moment. And that's because I've deliberately built a small portfolio. But I did spend 16 years, as you said, inside one of the largest strata management groups, and was licensee in charge there. So I've seen what happens at that sort of scale pretty close up. And what I saw was that when a business gets to that size, the only way it seems to be able to grow is just by adding more and more people. And the reason it has to add more people is that nobody's ever really written down how the work gets done. It tends to sit in, people's heads or strata managers' heads. So when you need more capacity, the only lever you've got is to add another person. And that person turns up and does the job their certain way, because there's nothing sort of telling them otherwise. And so you end up with 10 managers doing the same job in 10 different ways. And so the other thing that happens, and this is one that people often talk about, is you hit the point where you've got to stop managing the portfolio itself and you have to start running a business and leading people. And that's a really hard jump. Anyone who's been through it knows what I'm talking about there. I went through it myself a bunch of years ago. So this is where you've been good at doing the work yourself. You're very comfortable there. And now you've got to step back and lead the other people to do it instead. And so being a great strata manager doesn't automatically make you a great leader. They're completely different skills. And so a lot of people really struggle with that. For me, that's the bit that you notice. I think what's actually causing it is that the work was never kind of written down in the first place. And if you start with writing it down, you can now start to do things like training AI to do that work for you instead.
No, and that's a great point, Tim. And that's fair. Is we consider where the point is where it stops being safe to keep adding headcount, and as you said, start making that process work and writing them down to understand actually what you're doing. Because as you said, and it's across the industry itself. Is every strata manager has their own way of doing things, their own process of doing things, and until you understand how that's happening, you're going to have to continually add headcount to your business because everyone's doing something different rather than having a standardized process in that regards. So
Yeah.
now we're talking that process and writing it down and sitting there and looking at it and understanding it and what can be done by AI. But which tasks, whether it be trust accounting, levy runs, AGM preparation, compliance tracking, eats the most time per lot? And which ones, in your eyes, both Tim and Paul, do you see are most ready for the automation process for using AI moving forward?
Um,
Oh,
Paul, do you want
sorry.
to answer that? Yeah.
I think one of the an area that is pretty ready is with emails, as I mentioned before, with programs such as Copilot that are have the capacity to both prioritize and draft responses. For us, that's shaping up as a game changer in order to, and we're already experiencing significant time saving with with that program. I know there are other programs, applications that do the same sort of thing. I think that as far as the other tasks, such as accounting, levy runs, AGM prep, a lot of those are more background tasks. So they don't impact on the manager directly, but they certainly impact on the business in terms of streamlining and making the business more efficient, but also with AI, hopefully taking out some of the human errors that can come in as far as those processes, those administrative processes are concerned.
100%, Paul, it's those efficiencies within the total business that certainly help. And yes, we probably do need to break it down into what affects a strata manager because they're the ones that are the face of the business as such in that customer relations role versus what is a back office task and what can be taken away and made easier in that particular process. Sorry, Tim, you were going to say something?
No, I would just add, yeah, I mean, before the test that I ran early on was, before I hire, is to actually sit down and try to write out what you're going to expect that person to do step by step, and then what are the decisions they're going to have to make, who they hand things off to. If you can write it down, you probably don't need a person. You can go and build that process properly. You can potentially hand that off to an AI agent because that's what it's really great at doing is just following a set list of instructions. Um, if you can't write it down because it's a judgment, it relies on good relationships, being accountable to a committee, then that's where you need to have the human touch, because that's the real work that's going to be left. Um, as an example, one of the things I figured out early on was, and I do a lot of time tracking, and it's laborious and it's in and of itself a time-consuming task. But what it teaches you is the leaks in your business. And so, for example, one of the things I found early on was just filing emails every day, sitting there dragging and dropping emails into a folder, was taking up potentially 20 odd minutes a day. Whereas I've now built an agent that does that for me automatically, and I simply, read a report to double check where those things have gone. It takes me 2 minutes now. So there's that, trade-off immediately. A lot of people just don't run this test. They just hire more people, and have people sort of pick these things up.
No, 100%. And as you said, that unless you run that process yourself and you run that, sit down and look at it, you're just going to continually be adding that headcount to your business, which is then going to eat away at what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, adding more headcount adds more stress to your business. It adds more pressure to you as a manager in that regards, because you've got to manage those people. You've got to manage what processes they're doing. Your team becomes bigger, and then you need more people to manage the people as such. So it's a flow-on effect in that regards. So talking AI, and you've talked about a couple of examples there, Tim and Paul, how do we now move forward balancing AI automation with the level of service that owners expect? And we can see that's changing over time, but how do we balance that out now?
I would.
Sorry,
Oh,
you
sorry.
go, Tim. No,
I
you
was just
go.
going to say, I'd turn the question around because for me, automation is what makes the personal service possible in the first place. So, um, like I said, I started with the basic admin. It was the stuff that was getting in the way of me being able to give the personal service. So, if I'm sitting here all day doing admin, I can't pick up the phone when someone rings, and I can't come back to an email same day, right? So, things like issuing reports or creating reports, filing my emails, that sort of stuff, get those off my plate. That time can now go back into engaging with people. Because realistically, most owners aren't looking for a lovely experience with their levy notice. You can make it lovely and that's fine. But what they want is to be able to actually get a hold of you when something's gone wrong. So when people are upset, anything where there's like money involved in dispute or anything that's bad news, you want to be able to do that yourself, to have that human interaction. A system might be able to draft these things for you, but ultimately I'm going to be accountable for it. So that sort of stuff I would not hand over to software just yet.
Yeah, I was very much thinking along the same lines, Tim, that it's the automation is at the service of client relationships, that the more that can be automated, the more time is given to the managers to foster those client relationships, to build them. And that then has a very positive flow into client retention, to referrals, reviews, and builds up the professionalism of your business. So would very much agree with that. And where I think, and Tim, you touched on this also, was with automation, it can automate the areas of client service. And by client service, I mean the processes of AGMs, of arrears, of maintenance, of insurance, so that those client services can be what some of our people have referred to as brilliant basics. So in other words, they're done on time, they're done efficiently, and they form a really good foundation for the rest of the business, which can then focus on those areas that automation or AI can't deal with, which is face-to-face client relationship and giving time to deal with sometimes problem or people who can be difficult.
Now, thank you. They're both very great points there, and there's so much that we consider when we go through this particular process. But now, considering what we've talked about this morning, and we've talked about different things, what role does the right tech platform play versus internal process design? And which would you say should come first in that particular process? Now, I think I know where the answer is going to go because we've talked a little bit about this, but which one do you think comes first in that section?
Let you start that one, Tim.
I think if you look at the processes first, like you've got to look at the process first, but only far enough to know what it is that you are in the market for. So what most people do is buy the platform and then they sort of bend the business around whatever the platform can't do. So if you're redesigning your process is fine, and you can find real efficiencies in how you do things, but at the end of the day, if the platform can't execute it, then it doesn't really matter. The wrong platform adds extra steps that you didn't need, and it pushes you into these kind of workarounds where you're building a process around a gap in the software. And those workarounds don't necessarily go away. They start to stack up, and eventually you've got like someone on your payroll whose job is basically keeping the workaround alive, as opposed to working with a platform that can help you deal with those things. So that's something that a business ends up paying for in extra people and that sort of thing. So it works the other way as well. So good software doesn't necessarily solve a bad process. You just kind of get the wrong answer quicker as a result.
I think I've experienced both sides of this equation, Lucas, and the idea of redesigning internal processes to make up for a poor software platform or a platform that is rigid and that doesn't do things that you would like it to do or how you would like it to do, and also that doesn't give the opportunity to have input into perhaps some redesign or additional features that would make a big difference in terms of operational efficiency and just in being able to work the processes better. So that takes us to the other side of it, of having a tech platform that can be more nimble and that is not, it hasn't been necessarily built by accountants or someone like that, but that it is able to acknowledge the input of making managers' lives easier and looking at it from a user experience. And I think that's really important, that the software platforms are flexible enough to be able to receive input and to see their product broaden and grow at the same time.
Amal, what are your thoughts on that particular tech platform versus internal process redesign? Because you would have seen that yourself over your years and seen what's going on there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's as Tim says, and then also Paul in a way sort of confirm as well. It's like a chicken and egg situation, which comes first. I think both has to come sort of together. because like, I think we should, if you want to start from somewhere, I think we should start from the processes, because that's going to benefit you regardless of what's the platform you're going to use. But as Tim correctly mentioned, like, it doesn't matter like, how good your processes are. And if your platform can't sort of like, cater for them, then it's no point. For example, like, so you identify like, 100 different processes you're doing in your business, and then you identify like, 30 of them should be able to automate. Common sense. But if your platform doesn't support that, you still have to hire more people to do that. So therefore, like, if you have good processes, but and a good platform that aligns with your sort of like, the idea of like, identifying what can be automated, what can be actually handed over to AI, then that's where a selection of good platform come into play. So what I'm saying is start from the process, but at the same time, don't undermine that your current platform you're using may be sort of holding you back.
100% in seeing that. So we're talking, and we've talked a lot this morning about process redesigns and that. What's a practical low risk first step any strata management company could take in the next 90 days that means they can start scaling their business more efficiently from a process, from a tech perspective? What would be a first step that you, let's say, we'll start with Tim. Tim, what would be your first step in the next 90 days that someone could do?
I think it's just writing down where people's day goes. So logging your day properly rather than just guessing, because until you've actually got that data in front of you, a lot of people are just speculating about where their time's going. So if I had 90 days, I'd spend the first fortnight measuring, or you could even just do it in a week, to be honest. You know, a couple of weeks of picking one thing, and I'd pick whatever comes up the most often. So for me, it was daily filing of emails, for example. And also something that needs very little judgment as well. So what you do is then spend the rest of your quarter building out that tool and making sure that it actually works and doing testing over and over again. Do one thing properly and you'll get the buy-in of the people as well to move on to the next one. If the first one's a flop, people won't be that keen on doing it again. So try to do sort of 10 at once as well, and you'll end up finishing none of them. So do the math on this properly, because that's what changes the conversation. So if it's half an hour a day, that's somewhere around 125 hours in a year per person. Whatever you reckon an hour of your time is worth, that becomes your business case. So before you've measured it, you might look at a task and go, well, that's just compliance. It has to be done. It's never going to make us money. That's fine. Then what you need to do is cost it out, and you're having a very different kind of discussion around these things. The worst version I've seen is getting everyone in a room and going, right, what could we automate? Because you'll get a couple of good ideas. You'll get a lot of nice to haves. Everyone's got their own pet thing that they just don't like doing. But there's no data to actually help you choose between all these different options. And I've watched that go around in circles for months, and nothing ever came of it. Meanwhile, AI is, picking up, doing new things every day, and your competitors are out there, moving past you. So get the data, and then the decision can more or less make itself. If anyone's familiar with the work of Dan Martell, he wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. And the idea of that is if you free yourself up to earn more, you can effectively buy back your own time. So get that data and you will actually see row by row which one's taking up the most, and therefore what's costing you as a business the most, so that you can work on that. It might not be the prettiest thing or the sexiest thing, but as long as you've got that time back, you can now start to give that back to your clients in great experience that, as Paul said earlier, can organically grow your business in the right direction.
Paul?
I'm on the same wavelength, Tim, as yourself. I think what I would be focusing on would be the KPIs of the OC managers. In a kind of a portfolio health picture, so that all the different aspects of OC management can be measured, and then those measurements applied to each of the portfolios to give a very clear picture of where the business sits right now in terms of numbers, in terms of quality in particular, and professionalism. And it's important that those KPIs can be measured, and then once they're measured, then we can look then at ways of improving different aspects, so that if that comes down to emails that are not being responded to, or AGMs that are minutes that are not being written, or whatever it might be, that we've got a picture, and then we can look at, well, how can AI help to lift the quality of those various areas?
And both very, very, very valid points on looking at things differently. Vimal, what's your experience in this with dealing with the clients that you deal with?
Yeah, so let me share a sort of slide deck sort of prepared for this, because this is a very interesting topic you have just asked. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Without knowing Tim's answer, Paul's answer, I actually prepared this, but as you can see, how align my ideas with yours right here. So it's single sentence, if I answer your question, the lowest risk 90-day move is a measure what you actually do, price it, then shift it to the cheapest channel that you can do it well. And then on top of that, if we add Paul's comments saying yes, we should benchmark where we sit right now, because we can't sort of reduce the quality while actually doing that. So that's a really good add-on to this one. So as you can see, weeks 1 to 3, get the inventory, as Tim said, price it, how much what sort of effort you're putting it, and classify it take each task with the cheapest channel that could deliver it acceptably, right? So on the right-hand side, you can see the different channels I came up with. These numbers may not be 100% correct, but I guess they tell you the picture. Onshore Strata Manager, hourly rate could be productive. Hourly rate could be something like $103. Onshore admin support could be $68. Offshore managed services could be around $10 to $13. AI automation, it's not that cheap, but it's about $3 to $5 per hour, productive hour, in my estimate. But there are other things you can do without any cost added, depending on your platform, of course. Programmable automation, which means your platform should automate, already support certain things like this, maybe the invoice rules, sophisticated comprehensive invoice rules, which means as soon as you digitize an invoice, it should automatically flow into the right path, right channel, and then even maybe directly to the payment queue, things like that. Those doesn't cost, if they're included in your platform. Self-service portals. Out of the ones you're actually going to sort of in your list, so you recognize these are the things you need to be doing, but there could be some percentage could be self-service, people are coming to you to sort of ask the same question over and over again. That could be self-service, could be in a honest portal or somewhere, right? So yeah, so the next 90 days, this is my approach. I would identify all the tasks, and then identify how they should be served, using which channel.
No, and they're very valid points, and they're certainly things that are not going to take too much time as Tim said, as a business leader or a business owner to be able to get that data. Yes, it's not going to be, I'll use Tim's word, sexy doing it in that regards, because it does take that little bit of time. But that initial bit of short-term pain that you're going to go through to get the long-term gain is certainly going to be more efficient for your business going forward to be able to achieve those results that you want to look at that. But we now looked at what we can do within that 90 days and understand that possibly 1, maybe 2 tasks, whatever you get through in that regard. You don't want to look at your entire business in that 90 days, because that's going to cause issues. As Tim said, you're going to get people offside possibly by changing things, looking at what's going on, but you look at 1 or 2 tasks to be able to do that. But how do we then measure that scaling without growing your headcount is actually working? And what are the KPIs that matter the most in that regards to make sure that you're able to get those efficiencies and you're able to not grow your headcount as you grow your business in that regards? Tim?
It always comes back to time. That's the main thing for me. If filing emails was eating 30 minutes a day and now it doesn't, you've got that half hour back. That's the main thing that I'm always chasing. We've all got the same number of hours in a day. It's how we use those hours effectively. The catch to that is if you have now saved time and you don't do something deliberate with that. So what I mean is the second half of that question is, where did those hours actually end up? So if you save 30 minutes and they didn't go back into client work that's billable or growing the business, you haven't really saved anything. So you've just made the day a little bit less frantic. Obviously, one of the bigger measures is how many lots one manager can look after without the service dropping off. That's the one that tells you whether any of this is actually working, if they are capable of managing more lots or sort of growing their portfolio. And also, you've got to look at rework too. So if you automate something and it saves time, but then it's creating more errors that you have to fix down the line, you've essentially gone backwards. So you've got to be very conscious of that too. But it's all of those things. It's how much can get resolved without needing to be escalated to the leaders of the business. That's probably the main thing. If you can keep track of where your time's going. And one of the ways I've seen that really effectively in the past is measuring, Strata managers' billable hours. How many billable hours were they getting in a month before the change and versus after? If you've released them of non-billable activities that don't generate, billable work, you'll see that in the numbers. It's when they start to be freed up for those more sort of value-adding things where you start to see a bit of a shift in revenue as well.
Bamal, what's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, when you start this exercise, you should have a good measure of where your portfolio sits. What's your health score of your portfolio? That could consist of many things open task, overdue task, AGM, insurance status, managers inbox health, budget situation, cash flow, areas, you name it, right? So, and then also the customer satisfaction as well. So I think that's one of the very important KPIs you should have at the beginning of this process, so that where you sit, and then you have to make sure you're sort of not deteriorating while you actually improve your efficiencies. Also, then see we are improving. I think you should also measure something like cost per lot. How much actually sort of you're costing to manage that lot, right? So that should start reducing, while the other KPI, the property health score, should at least remain same or better. So those are the main two things I'm thinking. As Tim said, there are other things you can add, but those are the main two things come to my mind.
Paul, and I know you said you've got your business and you are very much focused on KPIs, and I understand that from your business perspective. What do you look at in that regards, and what KPIs matter the most to you?
I think from this point of view, it would be profit. That the growth of profit would be a KPI that would be reflected by more lots being managed at either the same or a reduced cost, so that there's the income is increasing, but the expenditure is remaining the same or is decreasing. And I'm reflecting on that. It seems to me that, I've thought for many years that there's a fundamental conflict in our industry, and that is of profit against service. That if we increase our levels of service, which very much in the past has meant increasing personnel and more managers, more admin support, more assistance, it means that the level of profit goes down because our expenses have gone up. And on the other hand, if we focus on profit to reduce our costs, then that can have a detrimental effect on service because we are loading up our managers with more lots under management, which puts them under stress, which then can cause retention issues. And so it's been that perennial balance of trying to balance one with the other. And I think what we have here with AI is the possibility and the option of breaking that conflict so that where it's not an either or, but we can start moving into a both profit and service scenario. And I think this, from that point of view, I think this is a wonderful opportunity.
And I agree with you, Paul. It's a changing. I'll put it down as the changing of the guard right now, because as you said, if your service levels went up in the past, your expenditure went up because you had to bring in more people to do things. But we're now at a point where we're seeing a change completely in our industry. Is that viewpoint of you can keep the same service levels or increase the service levels, but not have to increase the headcount in your business. So you will get those profit margins within that. And we've all seen it. We've all been in the industry long enough to know what happens in the strata industry, not just in Victoria, but nationally. And we've all seen the companies that grow and scale too fast without the right systems in place. What mistakes do you think those businesses make in doing that? And how do you see AI being able to rectify, and automation being able to rectify some of that situation? Tim?
Yeah, I mean, people would be familiar with the term of AI hallucinating. So AI hallucination is where it's basically just giving you rubbish answers. And that usually comes as a result of being given the wrong inputs in the first place. So if you're trying to automate something and the underlying data is no good, and that data is being fed into an AI, large language model, then, and if your procedures are out of date, if you start pointing AI at that, it is going to give you an answer that is very confident, very articulate, and very well written, but is completely and utterly wrong. And the experts reading the output, we see this all the time, right? We get owners writing to us these long, confidently written emails, and you just read it and you think, this is not true. None of this is true. It's rubbish. And we know that because we're experts in the field, but they don't. And so, this can happen to a large business and can be very difficult to deal with. So if you don't get the inputs right, then that's when you hear people say, oh, this AI is rubbish. And I'd put it back on them and say, well, what did you feed it in the first place? And is that potentially causing the issue? If a process is broken, if it's outdated and you start automating it, all you've done is just make it break faster, because that's exactly what an AI agent will do. It'll follow that process and just, or if there are gaps in the information, it'll just make it up. So I think the third one for me is be careful automating things that are, dealing with statutory or have like trust consequences without human supervision. If you get that wrong, it's not just embarrassing, you're now potentially in breach territory. So, levy calculations that are out, or compliance dates being missed, money going out of a trust account that shouldn't have, you are ultimately going to be accountable for what these AI agents are doing on your behalf. There is no escaping that. You cannot blame it. You are responsible for the outputs. So, have it read and draft things, give it hard rules for anything that touches, money or deadlines and things like that. When you're training AI agents, the way that the model that I put around it is, it's like a factory conveyor belt. If you've got robots building a car, you don't try and build one robot that builds the whole car. You have one that, installs the door, one that puts the screw on here. You give them very specific and targeted jobs and a very small standard operating procedure, and say, I want you to do these specific things, and then pass it off to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And eventually you do get a working car. So you have to think about that in terms of your AI. You might have one agent do one very small thing and then another, sort of slowly finish off that job. And if you're giving them clear standard operating procedures and good, accurate data, then they can be very helpful.
Thank you very much, Tim. Paul?
Yeah, I think, and just following on very much from Tim, what you were saying, that a key element here is trust. And I think that as systems and processes are put in place, it needs to be done in a way that trust is not jeopardized. I'm thinking an example of that for me is in reception. We've all had experience of AI answering phones, and I think it's probably one of the areas that we've received or we've heard of complaints, and we've complained ourselves when we've got an AI system answering the phone and we're trying to get through to someone or achieve something or get a problem solved, and seem to go round and round in circles and get very frustrated. And I think that's, to me, an example of taking things slowly and waiting until the AI systems are at a level that they can be trusted both by ourselves and also by our clients. So I think, to me, patience is a very important aspect of ensuring, as Tim said, that the systems are going to work properly.
Yeah, thank you. And Bimal, you've seen this across multiple companies because you sit there and see the things that go on day to day from an IntelliStrata perspective. What do you see that you've seen in the past and customers that you've dealt with that have made these mistakes? What mistakes do you see them making in that regards?
Yeah, I think Lucas, when you're small, for example, you're one man, company, like Tim does at the moment, managing your inbox may not be a big issue, right? But what happens is when you start growing, inbox is not a task management system, right? So that's a sort of when you're small, the systems you're using and then the way you actually manage them could be different, when you're actually growing. So one of the mistakes I am seeing is they're simply sort of without rethinking how this the process should be done. They simply sort of grow, which means one mailbox becomes 10 mailboxes. Therefore, the problems will be multiplied too. Right, so that's why before you grow, you need to think okay, am I using the right method, right process, right systems before I grow? Then only sort of you can sort of plan on growing. And also the other thing I think Tim and Paul also touched on this as well. We discussed as the first step we should actually figure out what are the processes we need to define. In that, I think we should add another column there, the risk of that process going wrong as well. So we can't simply say, okay, this process, we can simply give it to AI or not. So we should put a risk there. If the risk of that process is too high, maybe we should wait a bit. Right? Even though there are other channels that you can get it done cost effectively, we should actually wait a bit if the risk is too high. So what I'm saying is the mistake people are doing is growing too quick without rethinking how this bigger workload is going to look like. What are the problems we are going to face? So therefore, my advice to them is identify all your processes, figure out the risks of them, and then make sure when you grow, whether you have the right system sort of hand them over to. It could be a person, it could be an AI automation, right? So as Tim says, we should start small. I'm sure this is going to change. The way how fast the AI is actually sort of evolving, I'm sure these problems we are talking about may not be applicable in a couple of years' time. But for the time being, the best thing is have clear defined SOPs for the AIs, and then hand over small tasks one at a time to them.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your answers today. And we've looked at and discussed many different things today. And if we look back at the whole scenario of where we sit today, and 3 years ago, who would have thought AI would be discussed in Strata? It hadn't been discussed. It wasn't even involved in it. And look where we sit today. And we've talked with Tim, and Tim's building his own agents that are doing things in his regards. Paul's also doing the same in his business. And a lot of Strata businesses are doing the same thing as we sit here right now. But we need to consider, as we've talked about, ensuring the data is correct, ensuring the feed or the training that you give your agents is correct and it's looking at the right thing. I like the point that Tim brought out before, and he talked about it, is giving, not having one agent that does a whole process. And using the example of the car, you can't have that, because if that one agent fails, the whole thing fails in that regards. Whereas if you've got little steps in that process that are taken by different agents, you can pick up where the errors are a lot easier rather than running an entire process. So if you build a car with one particular robot, you would not know where to go looking if there was a problem and it didn't start, because you wouldn't know where the issue was. But we need to look at those things in that regards. So when we talk about scaling our portfolio, and we look at what we've talked about this morning, and I'll just ask for some closing comments from the three panelists this morning. And if anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A part, and we can ask the panelists to answer those particular questions as we go on. But if we look at scaling the businesses that we're talking about, and not increasing headcount, not decreasing profit in that regards, it really starts from the start, which is making sure that you've got your information correct, making sure that you've got, if you're using AI agents, it's going down that correct process and you're feeding it that information, but also ensuring that and utilizing that time, as Tim said, if he got 20 or 30 minutes back in regards to his time saving, what are you doing with that time? Because if you're not using that time to its fullest extent, it's really a waste of your time going down this path in that regards. So there's a lot of things that need to be considered as you grow your business moving forward, and look at, do I need to employ someone to do this, or can I get someone offshore possibly to do it to increase profits? Can I get an AI agent to do some of that admin work behind the scenes? And in the Strata industry, and I was recently talking with another company in relation to AIs, and they had a list of 400 items that they wanted to run an AI to get them to do in their business. That's a huge list to have that sitting there behind the scenes, but the agents that would sit there need to do that. And that's what we need to consider, is what do we need to do and what's going to save us the most time. So Tim, I'll just ask for a closing comment from you, and before we finish up, there is no questions coming through, but we'll ask for just some closing comments from yourself, mate. You're on mute too, sorry.
Yes. So look, you're right. And that's why I said earlier, if you've got a 90-day plan, quickly and decisively figure out what it is that you want to work on, and then spend the rest of the time working on it. It's where I've seen it go really wrong in a Strata business, was they spent a lot of time just coming up with this massive list. I myself have had the same problem in my own business. I have a very long laundry list of things I would love to automate. You start then building an agent, and you realize that it takes a little bit longer than you might expect. So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to prioritize at all times. You can have this long list, but like I said earlier, work on one at a time, get it right, then move on to the next one. Don't try and build 10 at the same time, because you'll find that you don't make progress on any of them meaningfully. And you end up with 10 half-built agents that aren't actually buying you back that time anyway. So just be very deliberate about that. When you ask people about what it is that they want, that's fine, but measure it properly in time, and let that inform your decision-making process around this, so that you don't end up going around in circles. Because if someone else is out there spending 6 months trying to go through a change management process with a large group of people, I'm using that 6 months to speed ahead of you. And that's the practical reality of what's happening right now. The world is moving very quickly. AI itself, in the last 3 years, has gone from, basic ChatGPT being a chatbot that did certain things to now, for example, seeing Claude Cowork actually run your computer for you. And it's going to continue to rapidly and exponentially increase in its capabilities until maybe the bubble bursts. I won't get into that whole debate. We could talk about that, but so it's moving fast, and you need to move quickly with it. This is like the internet all over again. When the internet came out, there were some people that embraced it, that went along for the ride, that learned about it, and they generally sort of got ahead. This is the same thing over. So the fact that people are here today learning about it is a very good indicator and a very good sign. It's then, how do I take all of this overwhelming amount of information and actually put it into something? And that's where I say, figure out the priorities, chip away at them bit by bit. Learn that process, learn what works, and then once you start to be able to do these things, and look, my business model is really based on it. It's based entirely on, can I run a portfolio of clients? I'm not looking to expand into a massive business that has 100 plus or strata schemes. What I'm looking to do is, can I make a good enough profit off managing like 20 buildings or 30 buildings that's good enough for me and for my wife and for our family, and delivers a wonderful service for our clients? Then I don't need to get greedy and expand out into being a massive business. I think that, and that's where I think the future of strata management is that a single strata manager can confidently manage a small number of buildings, do it really well, make a great profit, and the clients end up with this wonderful service. The question will eventually become, are they willing to pay for that? Or do they want a more basic service? And this could be where another sort of split in the market is that there are people who just do like a AI type of strata manager, and you don't get a person, and the advice may or may not be correct, but it's cheap and cheerful, and that sort of serves that part of the market. So I think you'll start to see a bit of a shift in where the market heads. Is some are going to go into high quality service, others are going to go for low, cheap and cheerful, and there will be different sectors of the market that want that, and AI will be able to sort of help us move in those directions.
Thank you, Tim. Paul, from your perspective, any closing comments?
Yeah, I'm excited. I just think this is, we're moving more and more into a whole new world. And as Tim said, I mean, the next 2 or 3 years is going to be incredible in terms of where we could be and what a webinar in 3 years' time we would be talking about, and how different it would be from today. And I think that once the agentic workflow capabilities are put in place with when actions can be done by AI as well as processing data, and then moving from that to making decisions and then actioning processes, the sky then becomes the limit. Then the options and possibilities are limitless almost. So I just think that it's incredibly exciting, and it's a great time to be in this industry where we can, to use 2 metaphors, to ride the wave and ride along at the same time. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that.
Thank you, Paul. We do have a couple of questions that are coming through, and I will go to the second one and then go back to the first one. So this one is for all 3 of you. Do I need to have paid help to design this, or can I learn to do it all myself with Claude/AI guiding me? Thoughts, please, gentlemen.
Well, I would need help.
Tim, I know you're heavily involved in it. What's your thoughts?
Look, I mean, I have the hidden advantage, not so hidden advantages on my website that my wife built a business on AI consulting and did that for several years, and now helps me with my business. But that being said, I also did do a lot of learning myself, and yeah, it's a really good question. For me, I'd love to get my business to a point that I can pay somebody to do that sort of work for me as I grow the business and deal with the clients and that sort of thing. Right now, I'm so small that I don't necessarily have that as a ability. So I think that the thing you've got to recognize is if you're paying consultants, that that's going to be a cost to the business, and for some people that might be perfectly fine, and that might actually buy back your time in a very effective way. Just make sure that you're learning along the way. Just learning and understanding the terminology and how things work and why they work, so that you can have the right expectations. And a good consultant's going to sort of teach you that along the way. You just don't want to get caught, I think, in a few years' time, not understanding how any of this stuff works. That's a bit of a risk. If you've got all these agents running in your business, but you don't know what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, that can you might get caught out there and not know how to sort of take it forward.
Thank you. And it is true. It's AI is something that, as Paul said, I said, it hasn't been around for a long time. And where are we going to go with this? But there are so many self-help systems out there, Lee, and it depends on what your business is, where you sit within that regards. So it's a really open-ended question as to where you want to take it. As Tim said, he's got an added advantage behind the scenes that he can use there to be able to get his business where he needs it to be. But all three of you, and Bimal being the CEO of IntelliStrata, Tim and Paul, you're both end users of IntelliStrata as well. The question that we had also put down is, how can IntelliStrata help specifically in dealing with some of these problems that have been discussed? Now, I'll go to you first, Bimal, in that regards, and then I'll get Tim and Paul to also give their side of it from that perspective as well.
Thanks, Lucas. In my vision, actually, what I want to do is actually break this vicious cycle of Strata. I think everyone agrees, we have a problem, we try to increase the profit, we lose the quality of work, right? So that's a vicious cycle. But I think, as Paul says, we are living in a really good time. I think finally we can see, hopefully in the next couple of years, this cycle is going to be broken, right? We are going to provide really good service. At the same time, the company is going to be profitable too. So to do that, IntelliStrata, that's why because of that vision, we actually do the groundwork now. That's why our MCP servers and everything is coming, into play, right? So it's not just random things. They actually come for a very specific reason. So that's why we are releasing our health scorecard on our platform now, which means any manager should be able to just look at their portfolio and see where I sit, what's my portfolio score is, or business owner can actually go to the platform and see where my total business sits, right? What's my score there? And then we can drill down to one single property and see where that particular property sits. Right, so that's the first thing we do. We actually set you the benchmark. We let you sort of quickly look at where you sit, and then from there we have a very advanced self-service portal. So as we mentioned, in 90-day plan, you identify the processes, and then you identify where you can hand it over to execute those processes. What's the cheapest option you can find? So self-service is going to be one of them. So we have a really advanced self-service portal included into the price of IntelliStrata you can use, and also program automation included in the IntelliStrata, invoice rules and things like that. And then comes the AI automation. Obviously, that's going to have additional cost, but we are sort of supporting that too. So with us, you can get that support from us, and then also we support offshore resources as well. That is the next cheapest option before you go to the Strata managers and onshore admin stuff and things like that. So IntelliStrata, we provide you all these different choices where you can sort of once you know your processes, where you can allocate them to sort of reduce your cost. So that's what we do. That's our vision. So with us, you can go that journey with us.
Paul, I'll ask for your advice on this one, because as I said, you're an end user of IntelliStrata. You're on mute.
Yeah, I am. The dog's barking in the background, so I hope that's not disturbing everybody. I think from an IntelliStrata point of view, what we are looking for are the tools to be able to achieve the goals that we have, and to we've talked about automating processes and just basically providing those efficiencies that we've been talking about. So I think that we've already seen those tools emerging, and I think I know there's a lot more in the roadmap, and for me, that's really where we see working with IntelliStrata is going to bear a lot of fruits as those tools of the trade become more and more available.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Tim?
I was super excited yesterday. I was chatting to Lucas about this. Some of the people here are going to be familiar with what an MCP server is, and for those that aren't, basically, I've now got so I use Claude. Some people use ChatGPT and all other interfaces. I've now got that connected to IntelliStrata, which is incredibly powerful, something that you haven't really seen elsewhere in our profession. And what that means is, for example, I can interface with Claude and say, ask it questions about, lot owner information or things going on with that strata scheme. Basically, if there's data in IntelliStrata, I can now quickly access that. I don't have to navigate through the system and click all the pages. I can just type in a question and get the answer, and it goes and reads, that information. And that, for me, is a massive unlock. It's going to speed up the way that I can work each day. So I've got my central kind of, place where I can go to. That's massive, and I'm really excited to start using that. And you guys have announced now that for those that use ChatGPT, that's an option there too. So that's been a big unlock. And I remember when Bimal was talking to me about that one. That was very exciting, and now it's actually here. And I see that as the key point of difference. There are other platforms out there that have been talking for years about things like going cloud-based and haven't managed to do it. But yet here we're actually seeing, real progress being made and sort of keeping up with the pace of what's going on in AI. So, yeah, that was a big one for me.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I'd like to thank you all for your time this morning. We have just gone on the hour, so we know everyone is busy. We don't want to take up too much of your time to be able to get you that time back. So Bimal, Tim, Paul, thank you so much for your time and the advice you've given and the answers to the questions you've had this morning. And for those of you who are online, thank you for joining us. There will be more of these coming up in the future. We are planning more, so we'll certainly hope to see you at those particular webinars in the future. But once again, thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, Lucas.
Thanks, everyone.